Our movie begins with Alvaro sitting on an island in front of the sea and reminiscing about it. And I interrupt him. I am his ex-girlfriend, who sits with him, and asks him about the reason why he brought her to this place from the island. Suddenly a seagull comes and makes a loud sound. Alvaro is very excited and afraid. She asks him if he has bad memories with the seagulls. Alvaro tells her that he has knots of birds, of the sea, of sand, and of every need. She is very captivated and tells him that she does not want to hear anything about his suffering. So the mouse changes the subject, and he asks her about the person she was with at the party. So she tells him that he is her friend, the sailor. He doesn't worry, because he's already linked. Alvaro is very relieved. Then I ask him for the second time why he invited him to the island. He tells her that he does not know, and we go back in time to the time when the pharaoh was floating with his best friend, Nyla, is at sea, and all those with them in the sea will remain before them. This is because they are younger than them, and he tells his owner that life is going on with them, and that's why they should have fun as much as they can. And at night, Alvaro sits with Nyla and the rest of their friends. Suddenly, Nyla interrupts them and confesses to them that he met a beautiful girl and that he is going to marry her and live with him in Canada, and everyone rejoices and celebrates it, and they can't believe that he decided to settle down after all this life. This is because he loves a life of freedom and hates connection and stability. So Nilo tells them that he is afraid to die alone, and that's why he decided to change his life. It appears that everyone is happy, except for Alvaro, who jokes that he is not interested, but he remains sad about the separation of his best friend. And then he sits with one of his girlfriends in a far place, and they enter into a relationship with each other. Suddenly, he sees his ex-girlfriend Uni dancing with a stranger at the party, so his girlfriend tells him to stop thinking about him. This is because it is impossible to combine a life of connection and that he must choose between them. But Alvaro tells her that he will choose both of them. He enters the party and fights with the person who is dancing with Una and beats him, but he will be very drunk, so he falls on the ground, and his friends follow him and take him far away. We will return to the island while Alvaro is staying. He tells Luna everything that happened before 11. Una tells him that he embarrassed her in front of her friends and insulted her, and that's why I got annoyed with him. Alvaro apologizes to her and completes his story, and we go back in time on the day of the fight. And Alvaro sits in the car, and he comes to his hand, so that his hands are snowing, and he puts him in the place of the injury. He rides the car with him and asks him about the reason that made him nervous, even though he is on one of the most beautiful islands in the world. And he asks him if he is. They are jealous of him because he is going to get married and live with his girlfriend, but he can't go back to Lana. He annoys Alvaro very much and tells him that they had plans to implement together, and he betrayed their promise and chose a life of love and engagement, and they agreed that they would ride half the waves of the world together. Neela tells him that he did not intend to fall in love, and he had everything he needed, and he will also be a father, and that's why he's happy. He wants to complete his life as a husband and father. Alvaro is very happy when he learns that his friend will be a father and forgives him, but his dreams of riding half the waves of the sea, and he tells the mouse that this is how his dream was impossible. Alvaro gets annoyed and gets out of the car and gets a ticket for 2 people from more than one country who will be detained. So he gets very shocked, and he apologizes to Alvaro because he disappointed his weight, and some hug him. And I hold Alvaro to get the 2 tickets and tell him that this is his gift for the honeymoon, and he gets in his car and walks, and Alvaro stays awake in front of the sea in his car until he falls asleep. On the second day, he wakes up to the sound of his mobile phone, and he hears from his older sister, who asks him to ask about her, and she tells him about her news and the news of their sick father and their mother, who misses him, and herself hears his voice and tells him that she loves him and waits for him. And the call is closed, and it appears that Alvaro is upset with himself because of his distance from his family, and then he gets out of the car and takes a bag and with him his sled that he rides with the waves, and he walks alone on the island, and it appears that he is in a place very far from all the people, and he is not with anyone in the region, and the pharaoh goes up to a hill above the sea, and he walks on it until he reaches a low place where he can go down to the sea, and it stays very soft. The mouse slides on the sand, but he can stop himself halfway down the slope. And trying to reach his mobile, but he slips more, so he tries his second hand. But the mobile phone is farther away, and it slides in the bag, and the mouse can't reach him. Because of the movement, the mouse slides more, and it reaches the end of the slope, and he grabs it one by one before it falls on the rocks and dies. Then he keeps counting to 10 more times. And he decides to tear himself away from the rocks. The mouse is sold for the last time, and he succeeds that he bounces away from the rocks. Because of the distance, Alfaro dives into the water to a great depth and flops his foot on the rocks with a very strong blow. So Alvaro quickly gets out of the water and looks at the rock, not believing that he did not match, and takes out his mobile phone to communicate with anyone. But he finds that his mobile phone is completely broken and won't open, and he begins to feel pain and finds his hand deeply wounded by the sand and the rocks, and he finds himself wounded in the pelvic bone. He tries to stand on his feet, but a strong breaking sound is heard, and he falls on the rock and faints. After a while, he rises and sits on the rock, and he takes off his own to tie his hand to it. Then he tries to move his leg, but he can't and keeps calling for anyone who can help him, but there will be no captivity for any human being on this side of the island or even from the sea. He puts on his bag, and he decides that he floats with his hands and one leg in the water, and this is so that he can reach the beach, and he goes down to the water and floats with his hands and feet, but he won't be able to face himself to a certain place, and he meets himself in the text of the water. Suddenly, he feels severe pain in his stomach, and he wouldn't be able to float or breathe. And we go to the future with the one who asks about the cause of his stomach pain at that time, so Alvaro tells her that the effort he was making in the water caused pressure on the bone. Broken pelvis. Thus, he was moving the bones and hurting his stomach, and that's why he was in pain and bleeding. And he says that at that time he kept trying to get to the surface of the water over and over again, but each time the pain was increasing, and then he said goodbye to all the people he knew in his life. I apologize to all the people I offended, and those among them are the same. Then he decided to give up, so she asks him about the need he is apologizing for. Alvaro tells her everything. So she tells him that I am upset. It was only now that she knew the reason why she came to the island with him, and this is because he wants to know what he did in it. And she continues and tells him that she loved him so much that she was ready to bounce with him from the look he fell from, and that she was ready to live with him the life of freedom that he wanted to live. And she remembers their memories while they had dinner together upstairs. Sand after they had traveled hundreds of miles just to try and dine under the moonlight, but complete with a tone of sadness, and she confesses to the mouse she now stopped loving him, and that she suffered a lot to be able to overcome his love. And now you will not be able to return to him again, even if I leave it, and she asks him to forget it and start over, and leave it and go towards the sea. Suddenly, Alvaro thinks of himself when he gave up and started drowning, that suddenly he decided at that time that he would not give up and float again to the surface until he could reach the surface. And then he passed out, and after 24 hours, the mouse surpasses him while he is alone. He is in pain because he is unable to heal his stomach or hand wound, or his broken leg, and the bear remains around him everywhere. This is because the wound is rotting, and the pharaoh will not have a drop of water or food, nor will he be able to catch something to eat, and he stays on the sand to see any boat in it, the sea or any limit on the island, but he can't find anything and loses hope completely, and he goes back to his place and drinks the last soda with him. And the weather is very hot. The sun is shining on his wound, which is covered by a shirt, and who causes more heat on the wound. He looked in his bag for anything that would help him, and he finds aluminum foil to allow the air to enter him. After a while, he finds his sled near the beach. So he quickly goes towards her, and he keeps crawling on his stomach, but the tide pushes the sleigh away, so the pharaoh gets closer, but a very high wave comes and pulls him into the sea, and the pharaoh can't resist it. And the wave takes him to the extent that he reaches the rocks, so Alvaro puts the armor of his bag in a rock of them, and he keeps holding it with his wounded hand until the wave subsides, and he faints from fatigue. Suddenly a seagull comes and eats who injured his exposed hand, so the mouse is in pain, and the bird is away from him, and he tries to get his hand out, but he can't move it anymore. He is forced to cut the bag in order to get his hand out, and then be on a han to reach the beach. And crawling on the sand, but his brain flopped on another rock. It is easy for him, and this is because he remains very weak due to the lack of food and water. After a while, he gets up and keeps crawling on the sand, but suddenly he gets a fishing hook in his hand and he screams in pain and he has to remove it from his hand while he is celibate. Then he finally reaches a place where he sits and he is not able to bear the thirst, so he decides that he takes a bath and drinks from it, and this is because there is no other solution in front of him, but he finds that the water is mixed with blood, and this is because of the internal bleeding he suffers from, and he remembers his memories with. They are having a romantic dinner on top of the sand dunes and they are happy. And then Alvaro goes to the sea to clean the wound on his hand, and he screams from the pen. And then it goes back to its place. He tries to dig with his cup in the middle of Ramla, hoping to find anything he can use. After a while, he finds a fishing net, and he keeps digging more, but he can't find anything. So he enters a small cave among the rocks to hide from the cold weather. He puts sand on his body, then he wraps himself in the net. He covers his neck and legs with aluminum, and it remains from a lot of falling. Suddenly he hears thunder and feels a strong wind, and he knows that the sky will rain. He spreads aluminum foil in front of him so that the rain can fall on him, and he puts his cup among the rocks, and drops of water fall from the sky for a while, and then stop. And I can't find Alvaro any water. I've completed, and be very thirsty, and sleep from so much fatigue, and he keeps talking to himself, and he says he doesn't want to die. And he keeps repeating the sentence until he sleeps. On the second day, he wakes up from sleep, and he stays in his place. Suddenly, he hears his mobile ringing. And he keeps digging everywhere around him like a madman, Mossadegh and Dana, and he keeps hearing the sound of the mobile phone everywhere, but he is unable to locate him. Until it calms down and walks behind the sound and crawls until it reaches it, and he keeps digging in Ramla until he finds him, and he sees that his family is calling him. And they prefer to talk to him, but Alvaro interrupts them and asks them to kill him, but he completes his family and their words are normal, and his big sister blooms and tells him that she loves him, and the mouse prefers and shouts at them, because they don't want to hear it, but then he realizes that he is hallucinating because of thirst and fatigue, and that there is no mobile, and there is no one who rang it in the first place, and that all of this is his imagination. And Alvaro keeps sleeping on Ramla, telling his family that he loves them. And he knows that he has never told them that in his life, but he is ready to tell them every day that he loves them if he stays alive. Then Alvaro sees his sled, which is still broken. Suddenly, he sees his friends in front of him while they are in the water, and they ask him to ride his sleigh and come after them. Alvaro stands on his feet, and all the nation is relieved, and he takes his sled and runs towards his companions in the water, and ride the waves, and he remains at the height of his happiness. But suddenly, the sound of a seagull is superior, and he knows that he was imagining also. And the bird finds a number of birds with it that they want to attack it. He laughs while shrieking and tells them to go away because there is nothing to eat. Here, after a while, he sees Alvaro boat from afar and he can't believe his eyes, so he takes his sled and goes down to the sea, but the wave will be very strong and you will return it to the beach again. But Alvaro kept resisting until he was able to go to sea, and he sleeps on his sleigh, and he tries to float as fast as he can, and he resists the plane as much as he can, until he stops after he finds that the boat has disappeared, and he thinks he was hallucinating and losing hope. And he still wants to give up, but he decides to resist, so he gets up again until he really makes sure that there is no boat, and he is not able to complete more than that. Not even able to return to the shore again, and he falls into the water and faints, and before he reaches the bottom, the rescue boat comes in. A person with a respirator comes out of it and does it to the surface of the water. Alvaro is finally rescued, and he enters the hospital while he is in a state of shock and is unable to speak. We go to the time when Alvaro is staying. He tells his friend Nilo what happened to him and tells him that he was afraid that he would die while carrying the sins of all the people he offended, and that before he died, he wished that he would apologize to his father and tell him what he was And that because of his pride, he remembered that his presence was permanent in his life. Because of this, he did not think that he would embrace him and not express his love to him one day, and he would continue and say that he made sure that he also fell in love with him, and that she was the person who made it impossible for someone to love him, but because of his selfishness and stupidity, he lost her, and he confesses to his friend that instead of being happy, he will marry and have a successor. He felt jealous of his wife, who had never seen her, although he is sure that she will be a kind and beautiful girl, and that he was not even from his son, who was still not born, although if he resembled him, he would be the best in the world, and he would be very captivated by his friend, and he would cry. So Alvaro continued and said that now he realized that he could live alone and that he could be a non-person. He is selfish and present in the lives of his family and friends without thinking of himself before them. The film ends and we know that it is a true story that happened to a mouse who spent 48 hours facing death alone and was rescued 2 kilometers away from the beach because of his slip, which was on the face of the water, and which indicated it to the diggers. And don't forget to subscribe to the Ladybug Synopsis channel.